In the mid-1970s, young women across the United States started vanishing. Some went missing from crowded college campuses in broad daylight, others from quiet neighborhoods. For months, police couldn't make sense of it. There was no suspect, no motive, just a growing pile of bodies. But when the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't a stranger hiding in the dark. It was someone who looked like the perfect neighbor, someone you would trust instantly. It's January 4th, 1974, Seattle, Washington. The air was sharp with the winter cold. On the quiet streets of the University District, students hurried between houses, wrapped in heavy coats and scarves. The sound of passing cars came and went like waves. To anyone watching, it was just a normal night that thrived on its youthful energy, where danger felt like a faraway thing. Inside her small basement apartment, Karen Sparks, a 19-year-old student at the University of Washington, was getting ready for bed. She was bright, energetic, a talented dancer who filled her days with classes and her nights with friends. She went to sleep unaware that something was going to happen to her that people would struggle to understand for decades. The next morning, she wasn't at her apartment. Police looked everywhere, questioned everyone she knew, but never got anything that could help them find her. Students moved on with their life. For them, it was nothing serious. Classes continued, life went on. If anything was whispered about the dorms or the apartments nearby, it was brushed off as just another strange incident in a busy city. But that winter was only the beginning. A month later, on February 1st, 1974, Linda Ann Healy, a 21-year-old student, was supposed to start her day. Her roommates woke to find her bed neatly made, her alarm clock buzzing, clothes for the day laid out. Everything seemed normal, except she was gone. At first, no one panicked. Maybe she had gone out early. Maybe she was with friends. After all, young students disappeared for a night every now and then. But when hours turned to days, worry began to spread. And just like before, there were no answers. As spring approached, the unease grew. Another woman vanished, then another. In dorm rooms and apartments, quiet conversations started to carry a nervous edge. How many disappearances could be explained away like this? Before we dive too deep into the story, let's meet this guy. And just for the sake of clarity, we are going to call him the Poor Guy. Poor Guy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. Louis, his mother, was unmarried, so to hide the shame, her parents raised him as their own child, telling him that Louis was his sister. He grew up in a confusing, unstable home. His grandfather was violent, and his grandmother struggled with depression. When he was 4, Louis moved with him to Tacoma, Washington, and later married Johnny Bundy. But he never accepted Johnny as his real father. He saw him as uneducated and kept his distance. As a boy, the Poor Guy seemed shy and polite, but he showed odd behavior. He liked sneaking into yards and peeping through the windows. In school, he did fairly well but struggled socially. Aloof, awkward, often preferring to be alone. In college, he studied psychology and grew more confident. Then he fell deeply in love with a woman from a wealthy background, who later broke up with him, leaving him crushed. By his mid-20s, he appeared polished and ambitious. He worked in politics, volunteered at a crisis hotline, impressed people with his charm. But privately, he was rehearsing manipulative tactics, pretending to be injured, testing how easily women trusted him. On the surface, he looked like a rising young professional. Underneath, something much darker was forming. Waiting for the right moment, it would finally break free. On July 14, 1974, Families packed into the Lake Sammamish State Park for a warm Sunday outing. The lake was crowded, full of laughter and children running barefoot across the grass. Couples lounged in the sun, groups of friends gathered around picnic blankets. Nothing about that day felt dangerous. It was the perfect picture of an ordinary summer, except for one detail. Several women recalled a polite young man walking through the crowd, his hand in a sling, asking for help with his sailboat. Some said yes, some said no. A few brushed it off with a laugh, thinking it was nothing serious. But by evening, two women, Janice Ad and Denise Naslund, never returned home. That was the first time Seattle realized something much bigger was happening. Whispers turned into warnings. Newspapers carried headlines about missing women. The once ordinary city streets began to feel different at night. Students locked their doors more carefully. Friends walked each other home. For them, the strange details were no longer easy to brush off. Something sinister was unfolding, and the city was just beginning to see it. For the investigators, this was the turning point. Dozens of witnesses described the same man, the same name, the same Volkswagen Beetle. For the first time, police had something to work with. Posters went up warning women to be more cautious, and the city's easy laughter was replaced with unease. And still, the suspect was nowhere to be found. The disappearances didn't stop. Donna Gail Manson, just another student, also went missing. Each case was reported separately as if they were unconnected stories. But for those watching closely, the pattern was forming. By 1975, the disappearances spread beyond Washington. In August 1975, a patrolman stopped a tan Volkswagen Beetle. Inside, strange items were found: handcuffs, rope, an ice pick. Suspicious but not enough for a conviction. The man driving was calm, polite, even friendly. He explained away the items with ease. To most, he didn't look like the kind to worry about. But secretly, investigators began to suspect. The suspect, now facing charges of attempted kidnapping, was allowed to review legal documents in the law library. Guards watched casually. He looked harmless, sitting with books spread before him. Then, without warning, he jumped from a second-story window and disappeared into the mountains. For days, the city was on edge. Search teams combed the woods, but he was gone. 6 days later, he was caught again. Hungry, tired, but still polite. Yet that wasn't the end. On December 13, 1977, he escaped once more, this time from his jail cell. He saw through the ceiling, slipped out of the building, and disappeared into the night. No one knew where he had gone, and just weeks later, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach would not return home from school. The sense of safety was gone. Across the country, the name that once meant nothing was now spoken with fear. Police didn't give up. They were now sure that all those women were kidnapped by that suspect. They put on all their effort into catching him. In February 1978, police in Florida pulled over a car with stolen plates. Inside was a man who gave a false name. But soon his identity was clear. After years of whispers, sightings, and disappearances, the manhunt was over. He confessed to all the crimes, and here is what he said he did to those women he had kidnapped. After kidnapping his victims, the poor guy would sexually assault them, then strangle them to death. Sometimes he kept their bodies for days or weeks, occasionally dismembered, burned, or buried the remains to hide the evidence. What followed was a trial unlike anything the country had seen. In court, he represented himself, charming some, unsettling others. Witnesses testified, Evidence was laid out, and the mask was slowly crumbled. For the first time, the public began to understand what had been happening since that cold January night in 1974. On January 24, 1978, the story ended in Florida's electric chair. Crowds gathered outside, cheering, holding signs. But for the families of the women who had been kidnapped, the silence remained. All it had taken was a smile, a polite word, a stranger who looked like anyone else. That was how ordinary days were turned into tragedies.